This morning I took the ACE Personal Trainer Certification exam and I passed. I needed a minimum score of 500. I scored 705 out of a possible 800. So I'm actually really super excited about that, and I wanted to put just a little vlog together, just kind of giving some of the tips and tricks and what methods I used to study for this exam. In terms of timeline, I ordered my package. I got the package that offers the most amount of stuff from ACE. I ordered that package the beginning of January of 2016. And knowing myself, I knew I needed a deadline, so I set the deadline for today, which is April 11, 2016, and I went ahead. So how I studied for this was basically I figured I would just try to review all the information, and believe me, there's a lot. When you get it, it's maybe overwhelming, to say the least. But I started off, the ACE website will actually send you emails and give you an example of how you should work your way through the materials, and I just followed that. I figured, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll follow that. So you start off with, I believe you review the first four chapters of the manual, and then they take you through the essentials of exercise science, which again, so much information. But what I did was I just went over it once, very high level. I didn't try to memorize the stuff they were providing. If it was extremely complicated, I didn't really spend a lot of time on trying to understand it yet, knowing that once I kind of went over everything once, I would then go back and look at things more in depth. So it took a few months for me to get through the manual. I have the 5th edition and the Essentials of Exercise Science. It probably took me almost 2 months, I would say, of a lot of reading each day, just sort of not skimming, I'm reading it, but again, I'm not memorizing it. I'm not getting really in depth. If I'm not understanding something, I'm sort of tucking that away in the back of my head as something I need to revisit. And then what I did when I was about probably 3 to 4 weeks out from my exam date, I decided to take one of the 2 tests that ACE provides online for you to, a sample test for you to practice. And so it was a 60-question test, and that was so unbelievably helpful for me because it showed me what I had acquired, what knowledge I had figured out just from reading it once, and what knowledge I needed to go back and review. So, for example, here's the results from one of the tests I took. So you can kind of see the percentages here, stuff I was grasping versus stuff I wasn't. And then on specific questions, they'll show you, okay, you were wrong, and it's reviewed on this page, so go take a look at that. So that's where I sort of set up what I would go back and review, because I mean there's literally thousands of pages here. So then after I went and took the online practice tests and kind of got a better sense of what I was strong at and what I was weak at, I went through my weaker points and really tried to, hammer home those points and really understand what it was. If there was some stuff I didn't understand at all, I would, and if the book was maybe not explaining it in a way that I could understand, because we all learn differently, I would maybe go onto YouTube or just Google what it was they were talking about and see if somebody else was discussing it in a different way that made more sense to me. I actually did that a lot, and I found it very helpful. There's actually quite a few very, very, very helpful videos out there. Really just Google it, whatever it is, whatever, if it's a programming thing or progression thing or something like that. There's a lot of people out there covering it. And maybe the way they explain it in the book doesn't really speak to you, but there's going to be a video or a blog or something out there that explains it to you in a way that you understand, and then you can kind of move on. So after doing that for a couple of weeks, I then just bit into my study companion, which is basically a very, very, very high-level summary review of each chapter. There's not a lot of information here, but what I used it for were the review questions. So I would go through, do all the review questions, and then see how I did on each chapter. Some chapters I got 10 out of 10. I'm like, great, I've obviously got that knowledge. Others I got 4 out of 10, and I knew that I had to go back and really, really hyper-focus on those because I was missing stuff. So I was lucky enough to be able to take a week off of my full-time job prior to the exam today so that I could really spend the time, maybe, I'd like to say I spent 8 to 9 hours a day, but probably didn't do that much, but 4 to 5 hours a day of really getting in depth with the chapters that I was not well versed in yet, and just study. Again, I looked up YouTube videos, I Googled it, anything else that kind of helped me wrap my head around what it was that I was reading. And then after I used the study companion and honed in on those chapters I knew I needed to work on, I then went to the flashcards. This was in the last few days prior to the exam. I started going through these. Again, this actually helped me feel pretty confident that I knew what I was talking about. Obviously, there's a few flashcards that I was like, I don't know what this is, involving. I don't know the answer to this, so then I would go back and look it up. But at this point, these were super invaluable. It doesn't take very long to get through this whole deck. But again, it's just finding out where you're strong and where you're weak and where you should go back and read before you go in and take the test. And one point on learning anatomy, if you don't have any background in it, like I did not, this book definitely covers anatomy, as does the Essentials of Exercise Science. However, I'm more of a visual learner, so while there are diagrams in here, them talking about the insertion point and the origin and the flexion, extension, which way does that muscle move, it was very difficult for me to uptake that information from reading it. So that was something I definitely looked online for, and there are oodles of videos out there that are talking about those things. There's a website, kenhub.com, KENHUB.com. I think it's like $25 a month, but I paid for 2 months worth just so I could go in and take their tutorials, and they are really, really, really good. Like, you're seeing it move, he's talking about it, you can click on things, it's very interactive. I really liked that. And I also bought an app for my phone and my iPad, so when I was just sitting around, I could play around and look at it, and it was visiblebody.com, or well, not .com. Visible Body is the app name. It's $25, which is a lot for an app, but again, I found that completely invaluable. If I was reading about, let's say, shoulder retraction in the book, and I wasn't fully comprehending what that would look like in real life, I would pull up the app, take a look at it, and then I was understanding the movement and what was happening to your shoulders during shoulder retraction. So I found that super duper helpful concept on it. There's a lot of key concepts throughout the book, and they're highlighted specifically because they're more important for the exam. So a few days before the exam, I went through the handbook, and I just read every key concept and made sure I had a working knowledge of what it was they were discussing. So after all of that, I went in and wrote the exam this morning, and as I mentioned earlier, I did pass, and I actually found it, I'm not going to say it was easy. There's definitely some questions that stumped me, but I felt confident every time I opened up a question that I at least knew what they were discussing, and sometimes the answers came very quickly. Other times I had to sort of stop and think and recollect some of the stuff I'd read. But overall, this process really worked well for me. I'm just looking at the online practice test I took. One of them I got 75%, and today I got 88%. So just knowing where you need to focus, because again, it's a lot of information. And while it's important to know all of it, there's definitely more weight in some areas than in others. So just taking those practice tests and then these in the chapters, knowing which chapters you're weakest at, that is my biggest suggestion. So if you have any questions, or if you're preparing for this and want a little, I'm not sure how much guidance I can give, but if you have any questions, please feel free to put them at the bottom of this blog. Otherwise, good luck and stay fit.